I'm Bruce Matson. We're going to talk about 5 mistakes to avoid for new Dynasty players. And let's get into it. Let's get to it. Number 1, don't wing your startup drafts. Come prepared. Do some research before you do your startup drafts. ADP is going to be a huge tool for you. It's going to be your best friend. DynastyLeagueFootball.com rolls out a new set of ADP every month. What they do is they conduct live drafts, take the average draft positions from there, and then you got your ADP, and that is refreshed at the beginning of each month. So that is a good resource to use. Another thing you can do is look at somebody else's draft. Try to get an idea of the flow of the draft. A live draft where it's an actual league on the line, where the picks matter to those people. And you can find those probably on Twitter. Just do some searches. Try and look for some actual drafts that happens. Maybe find a friend. Maybe ask somebody online. Maybe they'll show you their draft. If you don't do your research, things could go horribly wrong. We're talking about if you don't look at the positional advantages, if you don't look at how players should be valued, and you're just going off a whim like it's redraft, and things take a wrong turn, you're looking at a dynasty team that might be bare bones, that doesn't have any capital to really rebuild with, who is just sitting there with teams that are not functional for fantasy football, wide receiver 4s, 3s, and whatnot, and now you're scrounging to get back in the game. And the reason for that is you might be drafting too many players that are too young, too many players that are older veterans, and all these young players, not all of them hit. Not all the old guys hit, and you just went too far one way or another. You rostered too many running backs that were 26 years old. You rostered too many young wide receivers, and you know what? You had a bad run with them, and they didn't fire for you, and they busted on your team. You might have been lucky to scrounge up a couple wide receiver 3s. I've seen it happen. Make sure you do your research before your rookie drafts. And for number 2, don't go idle in your dynasty leagues. You need to be active. You need to be attacking the waiver wire. You need to turn and burn the last spot on your roster. You need to be looking at waivers throughout the season. You need to be looking at your team and other teams in your leagues throughout the season, throughout the off season, for potential trades that you could possibly be making. Also, whenever a trade happens in your dynasty league, that means another team got better. And if your league's active and there's a lot of trades going on, that means teams are getting better in your league and your team is just sitting there. You could have drafted a great dynasty team, but if you sat there, you've done nothing to it but just drafted your rookies, there's a good chance that some teams in your league is going to surpass you because they're making moves trying to get better. And eventually they're going to hit on some of those trades and they're going to surpass you. And some of your players are going to get older. Transition's going to happen. And you do not want to sit back there, be idle, and not paying attention to what's going on in your league. Another thing is, when you're trading in your league, you're learning how the other league mates in your league play the game. You're learning how they value wide receivers. You're learning how they value the running backs. And then when news drops on a player and you're interested in that player, maybe you can kick the tires and see if you can snatch that player on a discount, because you know Johnny in your league, he sells those wide receivers whenever bad news happens, and you can take advantage of that when the news is hot. You're not just trading just to trade. You're also trading to learn the environment in your league, especially you just jumped into a new league, you don't know anybody, it's a league that's online. That's one way to learn how your league functions, is just by being active, doing trade offers, kicking the tires, trying to get players, trying to see what happens when you offer this for that, or that for this. That's one way to get a leg up in your league. Also, note these transactions, note these trade offers and what happens. That way you can get a history of how your league mates responds to certain trade offers. Number 3 is very important. Don't overvalue young players. One thing we see a lot of new Dynasty players do is they try to build their teams into 5 to 10 year windows. They stock up on young players. They ignore the veterans. They have very little veterans on their team. And you know what happens? A lot of times, these young players don't hit. A lot of times, some of these players bust. And now you're sitting with a team with a lot of holes on them. And you don't have much capital to really make the move with. Not all young players hit. You really want a mix of players on your Dynasty team. You want to mix it up. You want to build for the future, but you also don't want to ignore the veterans. You do not want to get that rookie fever and oversell or overvalue the rookies, overvalue the young players. You don't want to try and build for 10 years down the road, because now is important too. You want to try and win now and also win later with a good mix. There are times where you'll see teams win with a lot of young talent on their roster, but a lot of times the best way to do it is to match your veterans and your young talent on your roster. That way you have a mix of your portfolio of win now players, rebuilding players, retooling players. That way you're productive now and for in the future. And for number 4, one thing you don't want to ignore is player contracts. And this is very important, because when that running back or that wide receiver, quarterback is approaching their contract, there's a chance this player could be hitting free agency, and you know a year or so in advance when that's potentially going to happen and how old they're going to be. And when that player hits the market in the NFL, you're going to see their value change. And you can look and see if it's going to impact for the negative, but it could go for the positive as well. Usually, speculative wide receivers and running backs, you're talking about lesser valued guys, if they go hit free agency, there's a chance they could go to a better situation. There's a lot of hope for them. There's a lot of FOMO on that, and that could create a liquidity moment where you can sell them on the market and reap the rewards, or buy them on the low in hopes that they land into a better situation. Or it could be an older running back who's been with their team for the last 5-6 years. Now they're finally hitting the market. You saw this a year or so down the road. You sold a year early instead of a year too late, and you are able to hit more value on your trade before that situation happens. When you're looking at your roster, look at the players, look whose contract status is about to be up within the next few years, and make a decision what you want to do with that player. Think forward. What could happen if this guy hits the free agency market? Is this player's value going to drop? Is this situation so grand that this player, you can only think of them producing here in this spot, and if they go to another team, you're going to be worried? You may want to sell a year early than a year too late, because at least you'll capitalize on the value. And number 5 is very important, and Dynasty gamers who do not prepare for future rookie draft classes and NFL free agency classes will get left in the dark and cannot and won't be able to take advantage of transition points when it comes to incoming talent, especially with rookie drafts. For example, last year was a deep wide receiver class. You could have got your ducks in a row by stacking up or getting your roster ready to take advantage by drafting a ton or plethora of wide receivers if you're a wide receiver needy, or knowing that the running back class was a little bit lighter, so you probably could have traded for some veterans, knowing that you had less rookie running backs to go after. This year's running back class is deep, so you could have took advantage of this by going hard in the paint with the rookie wide receivers, and then the following year going hard in the paint on the rookie running backs. Of course, when you zoom into the micro, you're taking the discounts or the values at the other positions, but overall landscape that's in front of your face in the next few years, you want to know what's happening. We know in the next few years when a class is going to be good at a certain position. We just don't know exactly which players or how many is going to be there. We tend to have a good idea on the macro, so you want to pay attention to what's going on in college and free agency classes as well. This year's free agency class was not stacked at the wide receiver position, so that was another indicator that you might have wanted to jump more into that 2021 rookie draft class. The 2022 free agency class at running back was a little deeper, so there was some veterans getting ready to be on the move. That gave you the indication that maybe you could hold on to your running backs, maybe you could do a sell, maybe you could catch somebody liquid on the market. You could have prepared for that a year in advance to make a deal or transition your roster for Dynasty Fantasy Football. Make sure you're checking dynastyleaguefootball.com and 4for4.com for more fantasy football information and content. And I know you need more Dynasty videos to watch to help you build your team. Smash this video right here and you'll be well on your way. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.